Hey guys, our topic this week is a request from Arnold Cruz, Brendan Gary, and Amalfi 5000. We'll be going over Bayonetta, the titular character from the Bayonetta series.
Before delving into Bayonetta herself, we're going to do a little bit of world setup in order to make everything that comes next easier to understand. So, first things first. The world of Bayonetta is split into three, technically four, distinct realms. The primary three are Paradiso, Heaven, the human world, and Inferno, Hell. The fourth realm is Purgatorio, which is a sort of astral reality that is our world adjacent, and that is where most of the combat takes place, so that Bayonetta can murder hordes of enemies without drawing attention from all of the normies. Paradiso is the home of the angels, Inferno to the demons, and the world of man is home to both humanity and the two most important factions in the Bayonetta games, the Umbra Witches and the Lumen Sages. The Lumen Sages were a faction that gained power by making pacts with the angels of Paradiso, and the Umbra Witches were a faction that gained power by making pacts with the demons of Inferno. However, despite this diametric opposition in their nature, the two groups originally coexisted in peace. In fact, though they obviously went about it in different ways, the two groups worked together for a singular purpose. Eons ago, the god of the human world, Aesir, each realm has its own ruler/godlike entity, gave a powerful treasure to each clan, the left eye of darkness to the Umbra Witches, and the right eye of light to the Lumen Sages. Using these two sources of power, the Witches and Sages maintained and protected the flow of time itself. And yes, that does mean we're going to be talking about time travel as this video goes on.
With that background setup out of the way, it's time to talk about Bayonetta herself. The Sages and Witches coexisted peacefully enough, but there was one cardinal rule that they were never supposed to break. The two factions were never meant to intermingle. An old prophetic verse proclaimed that the intersection of light and dark would bring calamity to this earth. As such, when a Lumen Sage by the name of Balder and an Umbra Witch by the name of Rosa fell in love and conceived a child, a personification of light and dark intersecting, who they named Cereza, the punishment was both harsh and completely nonsensical when you think about it. Rosa was sentenced to life imprisonment, Balder was banished from the Sages, and Cereza was left unharmed and simply forbidden from learning the arts of the Umbra Witches. I mean, most settings like this would have the child executed or something, but not in this case, so props to the Sages and Witches for being more humane, I guess? Long story short, Cereza grows up, is taught the skills of an Umbra Witch anyway, and even becomes the closest friend of Jeanne, another Umbra Witch who is in line to become their clan leader. However, all was not well in the world of Witches and Sages. After Cereza's birth, Balder's banishment, and Rosa's imprisonment, tensions rose between the Witches and the Sages, each blaming the other faction for allowing this potentially world-shattering breach of protocol to occur in the first place. Time passed, tensions rose, and eventually things broke into an all-out war between the Witches and the Sages. A very long war that led to the complete routing of the Lumen Sages. Though victorious, the Umbra Witches' numbers were severely reduced and their power weakened by the long war.
It was at this point that Balder, having been off in some banished corner, received false information that the Umbra Witches, now standing victorious over the broken Lumen Sage clan, were planning some sort of balance-shifting rebellion, and so he agreed to check things out and ensure that nothing of the sort would happen. While this was going on, the truth of the situation was revealed. That truth being that the angels who had given Balder the false uprising information planned to take the left eye of darkness and the right eye of light, collectively known as the eyes of the world, from the Witches and Sages respectively, by luring them all into the same spot and wiping them out. There were comparatively few witches left, and Balder was the last sage and possessor of the right eye. In response to this, Balder came to Rosa, his beloved's, side, but was too late to save her. And after her death, Balder swore vengeance and left in pursuit of Rosa's killer. Meanwhile, Cereza and Jeanne had been fighting off the onslaught that Balder had unwittingly brought their way, and they too came upon Rosa's corpse. The sight of her mother dead broke Cereza, draining her will to continue fighting. Jeanne, upon seeing this, locked Cereza in a sort of magical tomb with the intent of both sparing her life and mucking up the angels' plan, as Cereza was, like her father, the possessor of one of the eyes of the world. So if the angels couldn't get to/find her, then they couldn't complete their designs. Jeanne then fought through the oncoming hordes alone.
About 500 years later, Cereza is freed from her imprisoning tomb, but most of her memories are gone or in shambles. She recalls many of her skills as a fully trained Umbra Witch, and some details of the past, but she doesn't recall Jeanne, the exactitudes of her past to the war, etc. She doesn't even remember her own name. So, she takes on the name Bayonetta, and tools around for the next 20 years or so trying to figure out who she is. During this time, she comes to believe that a small red gem attached to her Umbran watch, a magic item carried by most all witches, which grants them time manipulation abilities and seeming immortality/long life, is the right eye entrusted to the Umbra Witch clan. Keeping this belief in mind, when she hears of the left eye surfacing in a town called Vigrid, she heads there to acquire it, believing that if she reunites the two eyes, she will regain her lost memories.
When Bayonetta arrives in Vigrid, a whole mess of stuff happens in comparatively rapid succession. She becomes the reluctant guardian of a young girl named Cereza, who thinks that Bayonetta is her mother. And yes, she is in fact later revealed to be a much younger Bayonetta from back before her mother was killed, somehow pulled forward into modern day by the big bad. She also encounters Jeanne, who survived the onslaught hundreds of years beforehand, but has, by the modern day, been brainwashed to serve the big bad. As the game progresses, Bayonetta encounters Jeanne several times, each encounter being confrontational to one degree or another. Since not only is Jeanne brainwashed, but Bayonetta doesn't remember who Jeanne is, thanks to her memory loss. Bayonetta also slowly becomes fonder of the young Cereza, though she remains unaware of her younger self's true identity for the majority of the game. Eventually, after battling through hordes of hostile angels, it is revealed that the big bad is none other than Bayonetta's long-lost father, Baldur, and that he has gone from being a decent man trying to save his beloved to corrupt dude now going along with the angels' plan from 500 years ago. That plan being to take both of the eyes of the world and use them to awaken and empower Paradisio's godlike entity, Jubileus, their equivalent to a seer. Not only would this let the angels awaken their slumbering god, but, empowered with the eyes, Jubileus would be able to combine the three realms back into a single realm. This process is inferred to be the kind that would torch most of reality as it currently stands. So, obviously that's not great. Though it's also entirely possible that Bayonetta at this point simply intended to stop Baldur's plans because he was a dick, and she was under the impression that he'd killed her mother.
Just before Baldur and Bayonetta's confrontation, Baldur revealed that the eyes of the world weren't stones, as Bayonetta had believed, but were in fact people, specifically Baldur and Bayonetta. He then absorbed the younger Cereza, and he and Bayonetta did battle. When Baldur was defeated, he and the younger Cereza were separated, and Bayonetta transported back in time, presumably to about when her younger self had gone missing, and put her back where she belonged. There was a touching moment between the two, with Bayonetta offering words of counsel and encouragement to her younger self, before returning to the present. Which is when the time travel aspect gets weird. So, with everything that the younger Cereza witnessed her mother, Bayonetta, doing up until she was returned back to her own time, namely being a confident, powerful woman who bossed her way through whatever problems she faced, when the moment came later that she found her real mother, Rosa, dead, she didn't break, and Jeanne didn't seal her away. Instead, the two continued to fight side by side, presumably escaping the onslaught together. Because of this, Cereza never went into a 500-year sleep, which meant she never lost her memories of who she was, or what the eyes of the world were. Resultantly, Bayonetta, upon stepping back into the modern day, was hit with a wave of memories and adjustments as she had all of this altered history flooding her brain. But additionally, the power of her Eye of the World was awakened. It could now be used, something that the version of her that had slept for 500 years had so far been unable to do.
Now all of that is, in terms of time travel, relatively normal stuff. What makes it weird is that almost nothing else changed. Based upon interactions with Jeanne later, Jeanne is aware of the change in Bayonetta, but also remembers acting as a brainwashed antagonist, remembers sealing her away, etc. Additionally, when Bayonetta returns to the present in the ruins that were left standing after her fight with Baldur, everything is as it was when she left, albeit with one major exception. Baldur wasn't dead. Now, we don't know if this was because of temporal shenanigans, him faking his death, or him regenerating, but whatever the reason, he was alive once more, and revealed that Bayonetta's altered, awakened eye state had actually been his plan all along. Told you time travel usually gets weird, but this is weird even for time travel. Bayonetta ends up passing out, seemingly overwhelmed by the combination of awakened eye and memory dump, and Balder takes her unconscious body and melds the two of them into a great statue, which served as the awakening vessel for Jubileus. Jeanne managed to pull Bayonetta out and wake her up, but by then Jubileus had awakened, though since Bayonetta and her eye had been pulled out beforehand, Jubileus didn't possess the power to merge the three realities. Bayonetta managed to defeat Jubileus, finishing the deific creature by working together with Jeanne to summon Queen Sheba, the demonic equivalent of Jubileus, who struck Jubileus down with such force that her soul was wrenched from her body and plunged into the sun itself, presumably ending Jubileus permanently. With Jubileus defeated, Bayonetta and Jeanne destroyed the remnants of her stone body as it fell to Earth so it wouldn't cause an extinction event. Meteors. Psh. Before joining up for the first time, maybe, in this reality as simply friends and continuing to hunt angels and such as per usual.
That's where Game 1 ends. Game 2 picks up sometime later around Christmas, despite a distinct lack of snow almost anywhere in this game, with Bayonetta out shopping before she's interrupted first by Jeanne for a friendly chat, and then almost immediately by a less than friendly encounter with some angels. An important note made early in the game is that since the death of Balder, and subsequently the destruction of the right eye of the world, things have been changing. The very fabric of reality seems a bit more chaotic, unbalanced. This is experienced firsthand by Bayonetta in this early string of angel fights, when she goes to finish things by summoning a demon dragon, a summon she uses commonly in the first game, which kills her foe as planned, but then breaks loose of its bindings and emerges fully formed into the world. Caught by surprise, that moment may well have been the end for Bayonetta, had Jeanne not jumped in the way, taking the dragon's blow instead of our protagonist, and in the process, having her soul shunted from her body, and, evidently dead, having her soul dragged down to Inferno. Part of the pact for any Umbra Witch that allows them to call upon demons such as the currently rampaging dragon demon means that when they die, the witch's soul is sent to Inferno, or Hell, to spend eternity.
Understandably upset, Bayonetta annihilates the dragon she'd summoned using another summoned demon to aid her, a bold move considering what just happened, then heads off to Fimbulvinter, a sacred mountain said to hold physical portals to both Paradiso and Inferno, with the intent of retrieving Jeanne's soul, since it was her fault that Jeanne died. Between she and her compatriots, the games have a colorful cast of supporting characters we've not mentioned for purposes of time. They had come to the determination that Jeanne had roughly 24 hours before her soul was permanently locked in the depths of Inferno, meaning that, presumably, if Bayonetta could make it to Jeanne's soul in Hell and use Jeanne's Umbra Watch to help her anchor her soul to her body, Jeanne would be able to return to the world of the living. Wasting no time, Bayonetta makes a beeline for Fimbulvinter. Along the way, she encounters a young boy named Loki. No, not that Loki, who is also planning to trek up the mountain. Since he sort of knows the way to the portals and Bayonetta is much handier in a fight than he is, the two agree to make the journey together to speed up their respective progress. Along the way, they encounter several angels that seem intent on capturing Loki, and even a masked Lumen Sage that stands in their way as well.
Over time, it is revealed that the Lumen Sage in question is actually Balder, Bayonetta's father, from 500 years ago. Remember when we said that he rushed off to avenge the death of Bayonetta's mother Rosa? Well, the Balder we meet in Bayonetta 2 is that Balder, 500 years younger than the evil version Bayonetta had to deal with in Bayonetta 1, and not yet a bad guy. Though he acts as an antagonist for most of the game because, as it turns out, Balder believes that Loki was Rosa's killer, and since Loki was Bayonetta's guide, she kept getting in Balder's way whenever he showed up to try and kill Loki. It turns out that Loki, who is missing a lot of his memory but puts the pieces together as the game goes on, not dissimilarly to Bayonetta's journey from the first game, is one half of Aesir. Evidently, eons ago, when Aesir gifted the sages and witches with the right and left eyes of the world, he did so by splitting his own power in two. In this process, he split his very soul into two. A good half, Loki, and an evil half named Lopter. Lopter, evil, powerful bastard that he was, wants to regain all of his lost power. But to do that, he needs to absorb the power from Loki, and also regain both of the eyes of the world. To that end, it was he who killed Rosa 500 years before, but he did so in a guise similar to Loki's appearance. Then, in the form of an angelic prophet, convinced Balder that Loki was the architect of his beloved Rosa's murder, and sent him to the present day to track Loki down and slay him. Hence, Balder and Bayonetta's continued butting of heads throughout the game.
All of this is revealed not long after Bayonetta successfully makes it to Inferno. With Loki's help, they opened the gate to Hell, and narrowly escaped a losing confrontation with both Lopter and Balder. Once inside, Bayonetta becomes separated from Loki, but knows that time is running out for Jeanne, and so she sets out to find her friend. After defeating the demon holding Jeanne's soul, Bayonetta uses the Umbra Watch to anchor Jeanne's soul to her body and sends her home. Nearly immediately afterwards, she spots Baldur attempting to kill Loki and intervenes. In the process, Loki seems to awaken to the last of his memories, and the awakening shunts both Baldur and Bayonetta back to the day Rosa died. While there in the past, Bayonetta discovers the true identity of Rosa's murderer, and convinces Baldur to come with her back to the present to end things. They arrive back in our time, and with the help of Jeanne, back amongst the living once more, hightail it back to Fimbulvinter to stop Lopter. Once they arrive, Jeanne stays back to hold off a literal army of both angels and demons, while Bayonetta and Baldur head on to confront Lopter. They arrive but are unable to stop Lopter from absorbing what power he wanted from Loki, and subsequently regaining the power of the Eyes of the World from Baldur and Bayonetta. Despite this tremendous power upgrade, Witch and Sage, daughter and father, fight on, pressing the attack against the now effectively deified Lopter, but it wasn't until Loki, tossed aside and believed useless by Lopter, played his trump card that things took a turn for the better. Lopter had specifically been interested in Loki's power to control the Eyes of the World, and so, that is what he had taken from Loki. But there were other powers that belonged to the original Aesir, powers Loki still possessed, including the ability to unmake anything. Because he's a god. So while Lopter, Bayonetta, and Baldur fought, Loki used that power to remove the Eyes of the World from existence, robbing Lopter of his newfound power. Drained and shocked as he was, Bayonetta and Baldur finished him off with relative ease. Combining their powers, the powers of Paradiso and Inferno, they call forth a creature called Omni, which quickly dispatches Lopter, separating his soul from his physical form, apparently common practice in this reality, catapulting Lopter's body off the mountain to be met by Jeanne, who summoned the very demon dragon that killed her at the game's beginning to devour Lopter's body.
However, Lopter wasn't done yet, and he could still do quite a bit with just his soul. Mocking Bayonetta and Baldur's efforts, he attempted to leave through a portal, intent on simply having his soul be reborn in a new body in some other time to continue his plans again. But Baldur intervened, trapping Lopter's soul within his own body so that Lopter could not flee and be reborn. Loki warned Baldur that he literally just absorbed a personification of pure evil and that it would corrupt him eventually, but Baldur stayed the course, turning to Bayonetta and revealing that he'd known she was his daughter the whole time, something they'd never discussed and that makes some of his actions during the game kinda questionable. He then asked her to ensure that if he ever strays from the path that she would put things right, a request which Bayonetta, already knowing what came next since she had already killed a very evil Baldur, simply acquiesced to, before calling sadly after her father after he vanished through the portal Lopter had opened before being absorbed, setting in motion the events that would lead to Baldur's evil appearance in Bayonetta 1. At different points in this game, the player is treated to two different cutscenes that only make sense after this revelation. We see a shot of the young Baldur, presumably back in the time where he belongs, between 500 years ago and the present, donning the mask worn by the evil Baldur, signifying that his corruption had either begun or was complete.
We are also shown a shot of Baldur after his defeat at Bayonetta and Jeanne's hands in Bayonetta 1, where he is shown to be dying, but still alive after their fight, and he manages to keep Lopter's soul from escaping his body, forcing the fleeing evil being back into his frame before dying, presumably permanently ridding the world of both his Eye of the World and Lopter himself. Yes, we too are unsure how he still had an eye in the first place to enact his plans from Bayonetta 1. It makes about as much sense as the way that Bayonetta's eye was awakened in Bayonetta 1, though, and probably has nearly the same answer, so just roll with it. Back to the present and Lopter's defeat at Bayonetta's hands, Bayonetta and Loki share some parting words, including confirming that with both eyes gone, the balance of the world should be safe again. Things might ultimately even be better, before he too dies thanks to the events of the battle. Hinting that, if she's lucky, Bayonetta might see him when he's reborn somewhere, and some win. The game ends a few days later with Jeanne and Bayonetta enjoying themselves doing some after-Christmas shopping. As they walk and talk, they are passed by a couple pushing a stroller, and though we don't see the child, we do see that it was holding a few cards. Cards reminiscent of those always carried by Loki, one of which blows out, catching Bayonetta's attention, inferring that perhaps Loki was reborn much more quickly than any of them thought. These possible musings are interrupted, however, by the appearance of more angels to fight, and it seems that, for Bayonetta and Jeanne, it's once again back to business as usual, at least until Bayonetta 3 comes out, which, fans of the series will be happy to know, is currently in production.
And That's basically Bayonetta, lead character from the Bayonetta series. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like, and if you have ideas for topics you'd like to see us do in the future, do like Arnold Cruz, Brendan Gary, and Amalfi 5000, and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore or Let's Play, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like it, hit this subscribe orb.
To see our last Let's Play, click or tap the link on the right.
For our last lore video, go to the link on the left.
And for a video chosen by the gods of YouTube from our channel, hit that link on top.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.